You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter @RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am the Jacob Valk, and you're not. A few things before we get going. Firstly, at the end of this show, you're going to get the interview that I did with David Sumner, the author of the book on Amos Alonzo Stagg. Really nice guy. He gave me a lot of praise, which feeds my ego, so I like him. Secondly, tonight, you're gonna get my NHL Season Preview. I'm gonna go conference by conference, division by division, team by team, breaking down what I think every team is going to do. It's going to be a lot of fun. I didn't do it last year because of the realignment. I didn't think it was conducive to a preview, but this year it is, so that's going to be a lot of fun. Thirdly, the saddest thing, in my opinion, I'll give you a peek into how the sausage is made. I got a new computer yesterday. Now, I use Macs. So one way that you can transfer your data from your old Mac to your new Mac is with Migration Assistant. It's the built-in thing. It's the preferred method. Okay, that's what you should use. The Migration Assistant really didn't work for me. I had a lot of issues with it. By the time it was completed, it was noon. Then when I tried to get on the internet with my new computer, kinda need to use the internet if I want to upload this show, the internet wasn't working. That took some time. Adobe Audition wasn't working. That took some time. The bottom line is, at this very moment, it is 2:22 p.m. Okay, I would have liked to have started recording earlier. Believe me, in an ideal world, that's what would have happened, but life happened. Now, why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because Astros White Sox Game 3 started at 2. That's right, I started recording after that game started. I don't think I've ever done that before. So I am going to disqualify myself from previewing it. The one thing I'll say is, we just finished the first inning. It's scoreless. So I'll make a pick. I just won't go in depth. I'll pick the White Sox. They're at home. I like Carlos Rodon. I picked the White Sox to win this series, so I'll pick the White Sox. Okay. Now on to the big story. You have no idea how much I don't want to start with this, but I have to. Kyrie Irving won't play for the Nets until he's vaccinated. The plan of him being a part-time player, only playing in road games, the Nets aren't going for that. They are laying the hammer down on Kyrie Irving. Either get vaccinated or you're not playing. I applaud the Nets for doing this. It's the right decision. I think it's very hard to have a player only available for half your games. You know how Enes Kanter isn't allowed to go into Canada because he has some weird thing with his immigration status? There's a reason he's never going to become a Toronto Raptor. It's because he'd miss half his games. I mean, this part-time player stuff, look, I would have understood it. I certainly would have disagreed with it, and every chance I got, I would have said to Kyrie Irving, get vaccinated. But I would have understood the Nets going along with it. They have surrendered themselves to player empowerment. Kevin Durant wants to bring in his friends, fine. Mortgage the future for James Harden, fine. Bring in an easy-to-play-for coach, fine. That's the way the NBA is, but even player empowerment has its limits. Like, I really applaud the Nets for this. I mean, this is an organization that has bent over backwards to accommodate Kyrie. From the saging to taking time off after the Capitol attack, to not pushing him to play in Game 7 against the Bucks. This team has done everything possible to support Kyrie Irving. He's not extending the same courtesy. This is a guy who grew up rooting for the Nets. The fact that he's doing this is sickening to me. I mean, I have to like Kyrie Irving as a Nets fan, but I have never had a harder time rooting for someone than I am Kyrie. I mean, I'll say this. If he gets vaccinated tomorrow, I'm letting him play, and we'll forget this. I'm willing to move past it and forget it if he gets vaccinated tomorrow. In fact, I'll even go a step further. The next season is going to start a week from today against the Bucks. I don't care if Kyrie doesn't play in any preseason games. I don't care if he doesn't practice. If Kyrie Irving gets vaccinated that morning, I'll let him play. And we'll forget this. Even if it's just one dose of the Pfizer vaccine or the Moderna vaccine, I'm okay with that. He can play with that. You don't need to be fully vaccinated in order to play, according to New York City law. You just need to have a dose. So here's my question. Why won't Kyrie go for that? What, the 2-shot vaccine? The first one is to install the microchip, and the second one is to put it on Satan's frequency? I mean, there's literally no good reason to not get the vaccine. We know that Kyrie's being an idiot. You want to tell me this is a personal choice issue? Look, it's not like LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin could hold Kyrie down while someone gave him the COVID vaccine. At the end of the day, he needs to be willing to do it, but I've made this point before. You have little kids that look up to you. You're sending the message to them that the vaccine isn't safe. You're going against scientific consensus. I don't like Jeff Van Gundy, but what he said about Kyrie is 100% right. What, he's doing his own research? He's conducting his own double-blind studies? He's right. Jeff Van Gundy's 100% right. And it's not too often I say that sentence. At the end of the day, no pun intended, the ball's in Kyrie's court. If he wants to sit out the entire season and collect half his paycheck, that's fine. He can do that. Technically, he can even do it next year. Because he has a player option for this coming season. So if New York City's law doesn't change, we may go through this next year. I mean, here's my question. Hypothetically, New York City's law changes on November 1st. Just hypothetically. Are the Nets going to welcome Kyrie back? Right then and there? Like, he'll get to play in their next game? I mean, knowing the Nets, there will be a ramp-up period. But will they welcome Kyrie back with open arms? I mean, there's an easy solution to this. And it's something that, at this point, I wouldn't be opposed to. Kyrie Irving for Ben Simmons straight up. Your headache for my headache. Yes, I understand Ben Simmons' issues. But I don't need him to score on the Nets. In fact, it's a bad thing if he's scoring for the Nets. I have Kevin Durant, James Harden, Joe Harris, LaMarcus Aldridge, etc., to do that. Ben Simmons should not be scoring. Let him handle the ball. Let him slash. Let him draw attention and then kick it out to an open shooter. Ben Simmons on the Nets would be lethal. He'd improve their rebounding. He'd improve their size. He'd improve their perimeter defense. Can Ben Simmons be the second best player on a championship winner? The answer is no. But I'll tell you this, he can be the third best player when Kevin Durant and James Harden are ahead of him on the pecking order. I love the idea of those three guys playing together. I mean, the onus would be on James Harden. Because with the Nets, he took on more of a distributing role. He really wasn't shooting that well. I can count on one hand the number of step-back threes I saw James Harden hit with the Nets. I don't care what the stats say. The eye test tells me that James Harden was not as good a scorer with the Nets as he was with the Rockets. I'm not knocking Harden. I love Harden. I want James Harden to sign an extension tomorrow. But even if the Nets don't trade for Simmons, he's going to need to alter his game. He's going to need to shoot more. He can't look to pass as much. Again, love Harden. But he's the X factor here. There's no question that a Nets team with Kevin Durant, James Harden, Joe Harris, LaMarcus Aldridge, Blake Griffin, Patty Mills, Paul Millsap, etc., is good enough to win an NBA title. Will they get past the Lakers? Probably not. The Lakers have a big 3. The Nets have a big 2. But just on paper, The Nets roster is good enough to win. If I'm looking at that roster in a bubble, the Nets have a roster good enough to win. I mean, as the season progresses, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Kyrie. You know this question isn't going to go away. Maybe the Nets will stop answering it, but people will be on Kyrie. You know that Durant is going to send him texts. You know Harden's going to send him texts. You know Steve Nash is going to text him. DeAndre Bembry, Sean Marks, Joe Tsai. Like, here's the thing. What happens if Kyrie Irving sees that the Nets are playing great basketball? They're by far and away the best team in the league. Would that change his mind on getting the vaccine? What if the Nets are really bad without him? I mean, realize, Kyrie Irving grew up a Nets fan. Would he want to see his childhood team struggle when he can make a difference? I don't know. There are a lot of variables here. I commend Kevin Durant, James Harden, Steve Nash, Sean Marks, and Joe Tsai for not going along with this. I'll tell you right now, if I was a guy like Nash, Marks, or Tsai, I think I would have caved. I think I would have said, you know what, we'll go along with this. I don't think I would have had the stones necessary to lay the hammer down. I mean, the support of Durant and Harden helps, but I just don't see myself being able to say to Kyrie Irving, you can't play. I mean, there is a little bit of hypocrisy because the Nets were so willing to placate Kyrie with everything else. In a weird way, I don't blame Kyrie for pushing this. If I could only play in half my team's games and that's sanctioned by the team, great, fantastic, I'll do that. I was a big fan of the TV show House, and one of the big elements in that show was the friendship between House and Wilson. There was a line that House said to Wilson, I don't remember it exactly, but it was something to the effect of, I keep borrowing money from you to see where your limit is. I want to test where the breaking point is. In essence, that's what Kyrie did here. He found the breaking point. You can't play in half your team's games. The Nets are saying, no, you can't borrow any more money from us. This is a really interesting situation. We haven't heard the last of it. I'll say this. I think a Kyrie for Simmons trade may be a little short-sighted. I mean, if the vaccine mandate can end in like 2 or 3 months, okay, Kyrie's back, he can finish the season with the team. Great, fantastic. You have a rested Kyrie Irving. Like, not for nothing, but Kyrie's the guy who can jump into a game with very little practice, no rehab games, and drop 30. That's how talented he is. But if the mandate is going to continue like indefinitely, you've got to think, what can I do to better this team for now? The Nets are a win now team. Trading Kyrie for Simmons, which you can do straight up, that's a legal trade, and it actually saves the Nets money, over $2 million, not counting the luxury tax savings, is a win now move. The ball is in Kyrie's court right now, no pun intended. He tested the Nets' patience. He got his answer. Now that he has it, let's see what he does with it. How crazy would it be if Kyrie Irving said, yeah, I just did this because I didn't want to play in the preseason. I saw an out to not have to play in the preseason, and I took it. Would you put that past him? Because I wouldn't. Please, 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 Kyrie. You may not be 100% comfortable with it, and that's okay. You can have reservations about it. I'd be lying to you if I said I was 100% comfortable getting the COVID vaccine. The thing had only been out for like 3 months by the time I got it. I had some reservations, but I went to Jones Beach and I got the vaccine. And I got the second dose 3 weeks later. And I even got the booster not that long ago. It's okay to be skeptical, but sometimes you need to do things for the greater good. That's what getting this vaccine is, for everyone, not just Kyrie. You're doing it for the greater good. Alright, now I'll give you some MLB Valk talk. I'll start by recapping yesterday's games. I'll start with Brewers Braves. Look, we knew that this would be a low-scoring series, but I don't think any of us saw the Brewers losing back-to-back 3-0 games. The total number of runs scored in this series by both teams is 9. The Brewers have only scored 2 runs in this series. It looks like the Islanders. In 2004, Steve Sterling's first year as head coach, when they lost to the Lightning in 5 games. The Braves aren't much better. They've only scored 8 runs through these 3 games, and they only really put 1 good swing on the ball. That was from Jock Peterson, the guy who looks like the second coming of Gates Brown. He's had 2 pinch hit home runs in this series. He is the first player in baseball history to hit 2 pinch hit home runs in the playoffs off the same pitcher. Adrian Hauser holds that distinction. I mean, the Braves' offense has not been impressive. There's no question about that, but at least they're winning. The Brewers look like a team that can't hit their way out of a paper bag. Look at what their big hitters are doing in this series. Colton Wong only has 1 hit. Avisail Garcia only has 1 hit. Lorenzo Cain only has 1 hit. Eduardo Escobar has 2 hits. The Braves' pitching is great, don't get me wrong, but there's a limit. At some point, it becomes, what am I doing wrong? Not, what are they doing right? You want to tell me that the seminal reason the Brewers lost was because Craig Counsell pulled Freddie Peralta too early? Hauser never should have been in that game to face Jock Peterson? Look, it was a stupid decision to pull Peralta. There's no question about that, but that's not why the Brewers lost. At the end of the day, they were only down 3-0 after 5 innings. So if they hold the Braves there and just score 1 run per inning, they win the game. Don't tell me that Peralta being pulled early was why the Brewers lost. The reason that the Brewers lost was because their hitting has been abysmal. I like Craig Counsell. I think he's a very good manager. He made a bad decision. There's no question about that. But you've got to hold people accountable. I'm not saying fire Counsell. I'm just saying he may need to hire some new hitting coaches. The hitting coach for the Brewers is Andy Haynes. The assistant hitting coach is Jacob Cruz. If things don't change for the Brew Crew, I'll come on this show and say that Haynes and Cruz should be fired. Moving on now to Rays Red Sox. If you had the Tampa Bay Rays, the American League's only 100-win team this year, the team that won baseball's toughest division this year, as the first team to be eliminated in the LDS, play lotto tonight. I mean, when it comes down to is this. The way the Rays do things isn't conducive to postseason success. That's the bottom line. We can marvel at their regular seasons all we want. They were a 90-win team in 2018. They just had the misfortune of being in a division with 200-game winners. And the Oakland Athletics that year won 97 games. The year after that, they won 96 games, but they lost to the Astros in the ALDS. Last year, they lost to the Dodgers in the World Series because Kevin Cash pulled Blake Snell way too early. This year, the Rays lost to an inferior Red Sox team because of their approach to pitching. The notion that they can start back-to-back rookies in games 1 and 2. It worked with McClanahan, but not Boz. Boz got shelled. Then we can start Drew Rasmussen, a guy who no one would know if he came to their house and delivered them a pizza. And then only have Colin McHugh go 2 innings, despite the fact that he's dealing, just shows that the Rays don't know how to win in October. The Rays are at the point where they've got to start showing some results. 4 straight successful seasons, back-to-back postseason losses because of questionable decisions. 2019, the Rays lost to a great Astros team. Alright, that team was 1 win away from winning the World Series. Alright, I'm not getting on them for that loss. But they could have beaten the Dodgers. If you force a Game 7, anything can happen. And they definitely should have beaten the Red Sox. When we were watching the wild card game a week ago between the Yankees and Red Sox, what was the thought in the back of your head? It really doesn't matter what's going to happen here, because whoever wins is just going to get destroyed by the Rays. I mean, that's what ticks me off as a Yankees fan. The Yankees could be the team in the ALCS right now. Seeing how the Rays did things, the Yankees could have taken advantage of that just like the Red Sox did. Starting Shane Baz, who only has 4 starts in the majors to his name. The Yankees lineup would have feasted on him. The Rays used 9 different pitchers in Game 3. They started someone who had no business starting. The Yankees could have won that game. Game 4, Colin McHugh gets pulled too early. You bring in Shane McClanahan on 3 days rest, and he gives up 5 runs. The Yankees could have done that. The New York Yankees could have easily been in the ALCS. Everything that we would have said about the Yankees if they had beaten the Red Sox would have been identical to what we said about the Red Sox once they clinched their ticket to the ALDS. There was just no reason to pull McHugh that early. The guy's dealing. Throws 2 innings, only gives up 1 hit. He had thrown 18 pitches. Nope, we have to pull him. It's not like you're starting some reliever. Colin McHugh has starting experience. I understand that his season high in innings pitched in a game this year was 3. But let him pitch that 3rd inning. Come on, who's better? A dealing Colin McHugh or an on 3 days rest Shane McClanahan? The answer's McHugh. Kevin Cash learned nothing from last year. Maybe he's a good regular season manager. In fact, there's no question that he is. But when it comes to the playoffs, this guy is clueless. My buddy Mark is a Rays fan. He has a term, Stage 1 managers, Stage 1 coaches. Kevin Cash strikes me as a Stage 1 manager. I don't see the Rays firing Cash, but I think it's fair to wonder if they'll ever win a World Series with him as manager. Because unless the Rays change their approach and realize that bullpen games don't work in October, I thought this Rays bullpen could be different. I was wrong. So now I've learned from that. Bullpen games in October don't work regardless of the bullpen. Until the Rays change their approach in October, they will be doomed to losing their last game of the season. Moving on now to Giants-Dodgers. You remember what I said yesterday about how this series has been disappointing? About how we didn't have that epic game in a series that I've been calling the real World Series? Well, we got an epic game yesterday. A 1-0 game with only 8 hits. Max Scherzer pitching a gem, only making 1 bad pitch. Camilo Doval, a guy who wasn't even the Giants' closer this year, coming in for a 6-out save. This guy is still considered a rookie. Next year, he'll be a rookie. And he comes in and gets a 6-out save? Gets some of the best players in baseball to make out? Trey Turner, Corey Seager, Justin Turner, Chris Taylor, AJ Pollock, and Gavin Lux all made out. That's an iconic game. I mean, I'll say this. When we think back to this game, one thing will stand out more than anything. Not the Longoria home run, not Doval's great performance, not Scherzer's great performance, going 7 innings, only giving up 1 run, striking out 10, making just 1 bad pitch. It'll be the wind. It's been a really long time since I've seen a game where the wind had that much of an impact. I've been to games, in fact, I've been to games this year where the wind has had some impact. Not like that. There were a lot of fly balls hit that if there had been no wind, or if the wind was blowing out rather than in, we probably would have had a different result. There probably would have been at least one more big hit. There probably would have been at least one more home run. I mean, Steven Duggar had some issues out there. Instead of camping under a ball, he was moving around. Some of those balls towards the end of the game, you thought to yourself, oh my God, is he going to botch this? He didn't. Give him credit. It's kind of funny. The Giants used to play in a wind tunnel. Candlestick Park. Dodger Stadium really doesn't have that reputation. Sure, maybe it'll get windy sometimes, but not like that. Like, if that game had been at Candlestick Park, okay, fully would have understood it. But for that game to be at Dodger Stadium, that's just bizarre. Alright, now on to today's games. Like I said, I'm disqualifying myself from talking about Astros White Sox. So let's get into Brewers Braves. Eric Lauer will be going for Milwaukee, and Charlie Morton will be going for Atlanta. I'm a little surprised to not see Corbin Burnes start this game on 3 days rest. With Milwaukee having their backs against the wall, I feel like you'd want your ace pitching even if it is on short rest. You gotta think he's available in relief, though. You gotta think that Eric Lauer's gonna have a short leash. Nothing against Lauer. He's a good pitcher. Went 7-5 this year with a 3.19 ERA. Very hard pitcher to prepare for. Throws 5 different pitches. Fastball, cutter, curveball, slider, changeup. And the thing about it is, he throws all his pitches kind of equally. Like, he throws the fastball above everything else, which is okay. That's very traditional. A ton of pitchers do that. No problem with that. But he'll throw the cutter against both righties and lefties at the same rate. Same thing with the curveball, same thing with the slider. He doesn't throw a changeup in on lefties, though. That changeup gets righties flailing towards the outer part of the plate. I'll say this about Lauer, though. While he's good, maybe even very good, I feel like what can make him great is if he throws that slider more. Very rarely, unless it's just a hanging cement mixer right down Broadway, is a hitter gonna make solid contact off that pitch. It's a power slider. It averages 87 miles per hour. It's actually one of the better sliders in baseball. It's incredibly underrated. I feel like Lauer should throw the fastball and slider at the same rate in the future. Or at the very least, make the slider the clear second pitch. When you look at Morton, he's a great postseason pitcher. Had the bad start in the World Series last year, but in his career in the postseason, he's 7-4 with a 3.34 ERA. He killed the Yankees in Game 7 of the 2017 ALCS. Morton started, McCullers finished it. Mostly curveball, fastball, very deceptive pitches, throws them from the same arm slot. He has a sinker, he has a cutter, and he has a changeup, but it's mostly curveball, fastball. He's just very deceptive. That's Morton's game. Deception. And it can work because, like I said, he's a great postseason pitcher. And this year he went 14-6 with a 3.34 ERA. He had 216 strikeouts. If any game in this series is going to be high scoring, it's going to be this one. Because you really don't have superstar pitchers on the mound. But this will be another low-scoring game. There's no question about that in my mind. The over-under is 8. Take the under. I don't feel like the Brewers' bats are gonna wake up against a great postseason pitcher like Morton. I'll say the Braves win it here. Moving on now to Giants-Dodgers. We have Anthony DeSclafani going up against Walker Buehler. Buehler is pitching on 3 days rest. With the Dodgers season on the line, that is a very reasonable decision. Now I'll say this, just in terms of pitching style, not ability, just style, DeSclafani and Buehler are very similar. DeSclafani throws 5 pitches, Buehler throws 6. They're not afraid to attack with a sinker. They have a curveball that they can put anywhere they want. They're very, very similar pitchers. The thing is, though, Buehler is just a better pitcher than DeSclafani. And he pitched well in Game 1. Went 6 1/3, only gave up 3 runs. He really only made 2 bad pitches. The reason that the Dodgers lost that game was because Logan Webb looked like the second coming of Juan Marichal. I said before this series started that it would be a 5-game series. I said the Dodgers would win. for that to come true, I have to pick the Dodgers here. I'll say this. It's very hard to bet against Walker Buehler. Alright, now I'll give you some NFL Valk talk. And I'll start with Colts-Ravens. Thank you, Lamar Jackson. According to Yahoo Sports, entering Monday, I had just a 24% chance of winning my fantasy football matchup. I needed Jackson to go off if I was going to win. I was down by 47 points. I'm thinking, as great as Lamar Jackson is, no way am I going to make up 47 points. I had Rodrigo Blankenship too, but no way are they combining for 47 points. But they did. In fact, I didn't even need Blankenship. Lamar Jackson had probably the best game of his career. With the entire football world watching, Jackson throws for 442 yards and 4 touchdowns. He was responsible for over 500 yards of offense with his arm and his legs. Jackson had 55.3 fantasy points. I'm in a league with unusual scoring. So, regardless, I won. I beat a team that put up 193 points. That scored the second most points in the league last week. I am now in the playoffs if the season ends today. And I gotta say this. I'm really excited about my team going forward. Lamar, Terry McLaurin, Cortland Sutton, Mike Williams in the 3rd round. He wasn't even a guy who I targeted. The draft just happened to be unfolding, and when it was my turn to pick, I saw Mike Williams available, wasn't in love with any of the other options, so it's like, okay, I'll take him. He looks like the second coming of Lance Allworth. Zach Moss has gotten more involved in the Bills offense. Tyler Higbee is doing his thing. Kyle Pitts had a breakout game on Sunday against the Jets. I think that's a sign of things to come. I got Elijah Mitchell off waivers after week 1. David Montgomery will be back, presumably by November. I'm feeling really good about this team. I mean, what else can you say about that game? On a night where the Ravens running backs combined for just 24 yards, Jackson put the offense on his shoulders and balled out. Mark Andrews had his best game. Marquise Brown balled out. They both had 2 touchdowns. They both had over 120 receiving yards. I can't even get on the Colts for blowing this game. I mean, they had a 22-3 lead with less than a minute left in the 3rd quarter. They should have ran away with this game, but Lamar Jackson decided that he really didn't want to send his fans home sad. You can't fault a team for falling victim to a player like Lamar Jackson. Just like you can't fault a team for falling victim to a guy like Patrick Mahomes, or Josh Allen, or Aaron Rodgers, or Tom Brady. Yes, the Colts should have won, but I can't bang my fist on the table and say this is an epic choke job. It's really not. You want to tell me Rodrigo Blankenship should have hit the 47-yard field goal? Come on. Haven't you been following the NFL? No kicker could make a kick this week. I mean, come on. Mason Crosby, Evan McPherson, Kaimi Fairbairn, Matt Amendola. Come on. You knew that kick wasn't going in. You knew that game was going to go into overtime. The only chance that the Colts had of winning the game at that point was if they got the ball first. They lost the coin flip, and Lamar Jackson led a 10-play drive that started at his own 32 and culminated with a Marquise Brown touchdown. He is a beast. He is either the second or third best quarterback in the NFL, depending on where you want to put Josh Allen. I'll put Lamar ahead of Rodgers. I'll put him ahead of Brady. I'll say this again. I got Lamar Jackson wrong coming out of Louisville. I thought he was a running back. I was dead wrong. I'm glad to be wrong. This guy is going to dominate the NFL for as long as he's playing football. Maybe he'll never be the best quarterback in the league. Maybe he'll be like Phillip Rivers. Always in the top 5, but never able to supplant Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, or Aaron Rodgers for that top spot. Maybe Lamar Jackson's going to settle into that role behind Mahomes and Allen, but that's still great. There's no shame in being Phillip Rivers. You just need to have more playoff success than him. And yeah, he's looked bad in the playoffs in the early part of his career, but so did Peyton Manning. So did John Elway. A lot can change. You've got to believe in Lamar Jackson. If you don't, I can't help you. Moving on now to John Gruden resigning from the Raiders. The Raiders special teams coach Rich Bisaccia will be Vegas's interim head coach. He's been a coach in the NFL for an incredibly long time. Since 2002, he's a John Gruden guy. And now, for the first time ever, he's a head coach. If you haven't been following the story, emails were uncovered in which Gruden used racist and homophobic language. He made denigrating comments to women. It's worth reading the New York Times article. It's by Ken Belson and Catherine Rosman. It was published yesterday. It's titled Raiders Coach Resigns After Homophobic and Misogynistic Emails. This was the only way that this saga could have ended. If it had just been the DeMaurice Smith email, where Gruden made a racist comment about his lips, I feel like Gruden could have survived that. I'm not saying that would have been the right thing to have happened, I'm just saying I think he would have survived it. But with the homophobic language, the misogynistic language, insulting Roger Goodell, insulting Sarah Thomas. You combine everything together, there was no other way for this story to have ended. John Gruden had to resign. We know the contract that he was on, 10 years, $100 million. Here's what I'm interested in. Does he get the balance of that contract? I'd be very curious. I mean, how's this for irony? This is the second time that Gruden leaves the Raiders through something that wasn't his own doing. It's one thing to leave after bad coaching. Okay, you could have controlled that. But the first time Gruden left, he was traded to the Buccaneers. He never wanted to leave Oakland. Now he's resigning in disgrace. Now John Gruden's career is over. He'll never coach in the NFL again. He won't be welcomed back at ESPN. He's gonna fade into obscurity. What a sad end for a really good coach, a very smart guy, a guy who seemed very likable, but was pulling the wool over everyone's eyes. Now, this is obviously less important, but it deserves mentioning the future of the Raiders. I don't see how they recover from this. Okay, maybe they'll tread water this year, but I don't think they're making the playoffs. And then once you hit the offseason, I foresee major changes. Look at that roster. Basically, everyone there is a John Gruden guy, with the exception of Derek Carr. There may be some others, but the vast majority of Las Vegas Raiders were brought in by John Gruden. A guy who builds his roster differently than any other guy in the NFL. You'll look at that coaching staff. It's a great coaching staff, full of smart guys, but they're all Gruden guys. The GM, Mike Mayock, was hired by John Gruden. There are going to be major changes in Vegas. I think the only way forward is to blow that team up. Get rid of everyone. Even Derek Carr wouldn't be untouchable. This team has John Gruden's fingerprints all over it. You can't say to another coach, play with this roster, make it work. I don't know any other coach that could have the Raiders playing like Gruden had them playing. They weren't great. I'm not making them out to be the Chiefs or anything, but they were solid. Every year they were solid. I mean, I'll throw a crazy scenario at you. And I actually wouldn't hate this. I could see this working. How about Jay Gruden taking over for his brother? Look, I'd fully understand it if Mark Davis said that he wanted to get rid of any Gruden connection. But that means a big rebuild. That means retooling this roster. That means getting rid of these really smart coaches. Guys like Bisaccia, Greg Olson, John Morton, Edgar Bennett, Tom Cable, Gus Bradley, Rod Marinelli, etc., etc. And Mike Mayock is GM. That means getting rid of basically everyone on the Raiders' payroll. If you want to avoid that, And I wouldn't mind that because the Raiders have been solid under Gruden. Not great, but solid. Bring in Jay Gruden. I mean, I'll tell you, I didn't think Jay Gruden was a bad head coach for the Redskins. Not great, but not terrible. If he was to make the argument that he was hamstrung by guys like Dan Snyder and Bruce Allen, and he wanted to build the roster the quote-unquote Gruden way, I could see you bringing in Jay to try to make this work. At the end of the day, Jay Gruden has nothing to do with his brother's emails. They just happen to share a last name. And I'll say this, even if it doesn't work, that's not the end of the world. Your only choice is hiring Jay Gruden or blowing things up. If Jay Gruden fails and the roster doesn't work, the coaching doesn't work, everything doesn't work, you're rebuilding anyway. Your only way of salvaging this, if you want to avoid a rebuild, and if you don't, I totally get it, is to hire Jay Gruden. But again, if you want to avoid that and rid yourself of all Gruden connections, that's fair, I totally get it, but that does require blowing the Raiders up. Alright, here's my interview with David Sumner. You're listening to the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and right now I'm joined by David Sumner, the author of Amos Alonzo Stagg, college football's greatest pioneer. David, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Having a great day here in Indiana.
All right, sounds good. I'm having a good day here in New York. So, Stag had a bunch of different options for how he was going to make a living. Why did he choose coaching football?
Why did he? Well, he had his heart set on entering the Presbyterian ministry from about age 16 up through about age 25 and 26, and he started getting feedback that he wasn't a very good speaker or a very good preacher. That kind of eroded his self-confidence. But he loved football. He had been an All-American at Yale, the first All-American team, and was coaching at what is now Springfield College, and that's where he decided he could have the most influence on young men and be the most successful.
Okay. All right, that makes a ton of sense, and certainly he was right. There's no question that he had a big impact on a lot of people. The list runs a mile long.
Yeah, you sound like you've done some research already. It is a mile long.
See, believe it or not, I actually prepare for my interviews.
That's great. Yeah.
So Stag is best known for coaching at the University of Chicago. How did he first get to the Maroons?
How did he first get to the Maroons? Well, it started out, he was in divinity school at Yale, and his professor was William Rainey Harper, who they became friends, very close. About 3 years later, Harper was tapped by John D. Rockefeller and others to be the founding president of the University of Chicago. And he wanted football to be a big part of the university, to give it national publicity and visibility. And he had known Stagg as a student. He had seen him play as a player. So he reached out to him and said, "Can you meet me for breakfast in New York in November, and let's talk about this." And that was the beginning of it. Okay. All right. So Stagg won 2 national titles with the Maroons. Well, fast forward a little bit. Okay. What can you tell us about the 1905 Maroons? Well, the most unusual fact about the 1905 Maroons was they defeated the University of Michigan, which had won something like 60 50 or 60 consecutive games over 5 seasons, and that 1905 game against Michigan, which occurred at the end of the season, received huge national publicity. Is still frequently written about it, and Stag team defeated Michigan 2-0 because of a safety. They kick to Michigan team. The receiver received it in the end zone and tried to go forward, and he was pushed back into the end zone, and so that ended Michigan's undefeated streak.
Let this be a lesson. Never return a punt from your own end zone.
No, never. And this guy felt terrible about it. He got widely criticized, and he transferred.
Yeah, that guy's name was Denny Clark. He transferred.
Clark.
Yeah, he transferred to MIT, and he was so haunted by that mistake that he committed suicide at the age of 46 in 1932. Isn't that sad?
Yeah, that's really, really sad. I mean, sheesh, what can you say about it? He was a son of an Episcopal minister also, which is not relevant, but I'm just so sad that he carried that with him throughout. I mean, there may have been other factors that caused his suicide.
Right.
I mean, normally you can get over setbacks like that, but...
Yeah, I mean, that is a big blunder, though. I mean, like you said, the Wolverines had a 56-game unbeaten streak, and Clark was really the seminal reason for that winning streak being snapped. I don't blame him for being mad at himself, but certainly killing yourself isn't the way to go. I'm sure you'd agree with that.
Right. And, of course, my memory's escaping me a minute. Who was the famous coach at Michigan? The point a minute coach. They literally scored a point a minute.
That's embarrassing. I should know that.
Well, I should too. It'll come to me in a minute.
Fielding Yost? Was it Fielding Yost?
Yeah, Fielding Yost. Yep.
Oh, wow.
Yost. Yep.
Pulled that one out of my rear end.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good job by me.
It is. Yeah. 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 He was quite like Stag. He was actually more charismatic and more colorful than Stag. Used a lot more profanity than Stag, but he was certainly a great coach as well.
Him and Stag both went into the first college football Hall of Fame class in 1951. Well deserved.
Yep.
Talking to David Sumner, the author of Amos Alonzo Stagg, college football's greatest pioneer. So why did Stagg advocate for vegetarianism?
That's an interesting question. He wasn't a complete vegetarian all of his life, but certainly as he got older, there were several quotes in the book that he found. He said something to the effect that he had gradually eliminated meats from his life. I think it was just for health reasons. He was very, he didn't drink, he didn't smoke, he didn't even drink coffee. I mean, I think he really wanted to live a long time, and I think he figured out on his own this is one way it could help him do that.
Yeah, I interviewed a couple people a while back about the benefits of veganism, so obviously more drastic than vegetarianism, but certainly Stagg advocating a healthy lifestyle is part of the reason why he lived to the age of 102. I'm sure you'd agree with that.
I don't think there's any doubt about it. And, he would never weigh more than over 160, 65 pounds, and generally smaller people tend to live longer as well.
Yeah, I'm not too long for this world. I'm a big guy.
Oh, yeah. Well, I lost almost 50 pounds because I wanted to live a long time. So you can do it, yeah.
What's your secret?
I use the Weight Watchers program, weighed in every week, and follow their system, which basically you get a lot of variety and you can fix your own meals. But
right.
It was just healthy food, nothing fried, no fats, stuff like that.
So how did Stagg incorporate his faith into his coaching?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think he had a lot of. He didn't wear it on his sleeve. He didn't try to convert his players. I mean, he treated everybody. He never raised his voice. He never got angry. Sometimes they call him jackass. He was most famous for calling his players jackass, and sometimes they'd call him a double jackass. But that's the worst his profanity ever got. But in general, he was calm along the sidelines, even when they were losing and when they lost. He didn't get angry and criticize them. He said, "Well, we'll just try to improve what we can next time." So I think basically it was just treating his players with love and respect and always being honest. I mean, there was a time. This is an interesting anecdote. There was a time once. I think I'd had to look up the specific. Chicago. The referee said Chicago made a first down, and he protested the referee and said, "I don't think we really made a first down on that play. Could you look at that again?" And so, that was the way he was. At one time, he was, in the early years before they had a lot of referees, he was asked to referee a game that his own team was playing in, and everybody respected him. Nobody ever questioned his decisions on his calls. So I think he's certainly known for his honesty. And, that was at the very end of the book, a sports writer had asked him how he wanted to be remembered. That was about a year before he died. And he said, "I'd like to be remembered as an honest man." Outside the football field, he was very generous, gave money to his church. He helped his sister and friends. He was, he never had a lot of money because he gave a lot of it away. But he was a very generous man with the money that he and his wife had.
Okay. All right, that's good to hear. So Stag was the head coach of a bunch of great teams at Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of the 1905 team, what team do you think was the best?
Outside of the 1905 team, I think certainly the 1913 team, which was undefeated. They won 7 and lost 0. But there were, they had 7 conference championships, Big Ten conference championships, and some of those others would rank close in that when they almost went undefeated. It was an interesting statistic I found. I was compiling all these statistics and data. The only big team that beat Chicago more often than it beat them was Michigan and Wisconsin. He beat every other Big Ten team more often than he lost to those teams. So I think for a school that nobody thinks about as having football now, that was a pretty remarkable record and shows you, what a powerhouse it was during those years, certainly during the between 1900 and about 1920, 1925. It was certainly ranked among the top 5 or 6 teams in the nation.
Yeah, no question about that. Talking to David Sumner, the author of Amos Alonzo Stagg, college football's greatest pioneer. So why did University of Chicago president Robert Maynard Hutchins force Stagg out?
Well, first of all, he disliked football. He's known for saying, whenever I get the urge to exercise, I lay down until it goes away. And he also wrote in a magazine article that he felt that football had no place at a school like University of Chicago that had high academic standards. So he definitely had a prejudice against football. But beyond that, it can't all be blamed on him because starting in about 1915, Chicago gradually began increasing its admission standards and found it increasingly difficult to recruit athletes, the top athletes, because it was expensive. One of the 2 most expensive universities in the Big Ten. They could not give scholarships. They could only give guaranteed jobs on campus. So, and also during the 20s, the other big teams Big Ten teams started hugely expanding their programs, expanding their stadiums, and they just became much more competitive. And it got to the point that Chicago could not compile a winning record against the Big Ten teams. They did not have a winning record after about 1928, I think. 1927 was the last year they had a winning record. And so you have those two combinations, just harder to get players and a president who didn't like football. He just wanted pure academics and pure scholarship. That was pretty much what happened.
Well, Stag didn't stay out of coaching for long. How did he end up with the Pacific Tigers?
That's a good question because, well, first of all, when Chicago finally terminating, there was a national outrage. They started getting letters and telegrams. The president and started getting letters and telegrams from all over the country. But as soon as he started getting inquiries from other universities. They were interested in, University Pacific wasn't the only one. And it was actually an alumni of the University of Pacific who was president of the San Francisco Alumni Club who first telegrams Stag and say, would you be interested in a job here? It's called the College of the Pacific then. And he said, send me more information. And he said, well, I think I would be. And it was a small church-related school that fit in with his Christian values. And, this alumni referred the president of the college to him. And they were very interested in him from right away and went through several interviews, or 2 or 3 interviews, one in California and one in Chicago. Well, he had a huge outpouring from alumni, from coaches in the Western Conference, from UCLA. He had all these telegrams, which I actually read these telegrams, from coaches at Washington and UCLA and Southern Cal and others, greeting him and congratulating him on accepting the job at the College of the Pacific. So, that was it. He really enjoyed it there. He coached there 14 years before the same thing happened. He started having 3 or 4 losing seasons, and they kind of said, well, I think it's time for you to look elsewhere.
You took the next question right out of my mouth. If you can, go a little more in depth on why he was asked to resign. Go ahead. Let me hear.
Yeah, well, it was basically a losing seasons. I'd have to look at the chart in my book, but he had an undefeated team in 1943, and that was when he was named Coach of the Year, National Coach of the Year, at the age of 81. But the next 3 seasons were losing seasons, and alumni started complaining, and they offered him another job, like a public relations job as an advisor to the president or something like that. And his heart set on football. That his whole lifetime motive and aspiration was coaching young men and helping them grow. And so he said, well, thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to look for another job. And, that led to the next step, which is his son and the president of Susquehanna University inviting him to join his son as co-coach at Susquehanna, which is a small private school in central Pennsylvania, not too far from Harrisburg. But his son had already coached there. Amos Alonzo Jr. had already coached there 7 or 8 years when they invited the senior Stag to come join them.
Did he like coaching with his son?
He did. It seemed like it worked out pretty well. It was pretty well known that he was the de facto head coach. His son had an overworked schedule. He coached tennis, he taught classes, he was athletic director, and I think his son was glad to have the help, never felt threatened by his dad. Basically, his dad, the senior Stag, coached the offense, and the son coached the defense. And they had a so-so record. They did have 1 undefeated season, the only one that Susquehanna had ever had up until that time, and I think that was in 1951, but it seemed like they had a very harmonious relationship.
Okay. All right, that's good to hear. talking to David Sumner, the author of Amos Alonzo Stagg, College Football's Greatest Pioneer. And David, I'll get you out on this. Stagg made a bunch of innovations to the sport of football when it was in its infancy. Which of those innovations do you think is the most important?
Which is the most important? I think the two most important that most people would never recognize was inventing the huddle, being the first coach to use the huddle. And that actually happened when they were playing an indoor game at Madison Square Garden in 1896. And the noise was so loud, he said, guys better bunch up in the back and get your instructions from the quarterback. And the other one, which was about 10 years later, was putting numerals on jerseys. Wow, what
a novel idea.
Right. And very soon, like within a year, the conference and the NCAA had adopted it and required all teams to start putting their numerals on jerseys as well as later. The other one, which I think is pretty interesting, that he invented the onside kick. And of course, that is used very frequently, in football today. You know that, but
yeah. Hey, I'm a Jets fan. I saw my team miss an onside kick on Sunday.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. I can't get on anyone for missing it. It's impossible to field an onside kick, but still, it would have been nice to field it. Have a chance to tie the game up.
Yeah, it's a big help when you can keep the ball, but that seems to happen about 10% of the time.
Something like that. I've always wondered why in an onside kick the kicker didn't just drill it at someone's head or drill it at someone's legs, start a free-for-all, and maybe you come out with the ball. I just feel like that's the best thing to do rather than kick it right to someone with good hands. What are your thoughts on that?
I never thought of that, but it makes a lot of sense. And, there's no way of predicting which way it's going to go. But, of course, I guess maybe there's also the fairly good chance that if he kicks it directly at somebody, the guy's going to catch it and fall down or run. So that was probably had something to do with it.
Yeah, I'm just thinking maybe a different way to do it because the current way just doesn't work. I'm just thinking outside the box a little bit, much like Amos Alonzo Stagg did.
Yeah. So there are other minor inventions, like the tackling sled, things that most people kind of more behind the scenes. Certainly a lot of different formations and plays that he was innovative, and there's a list of them in the book.
Right. All right, that was David Sumner. His book is Amos Alonzo Stagg, College Football's Greatest Pioneer. Thanks for listening. Here comes the outro.
Thanks for the plug, Jacob from the past. It does mean a lot. You'll get my NHL season preview tonight. Regular episodes of the Jacob Valk Show come your way every weekday afternoon. Until next time, I'm Jacob Valk. And always remember, if you disagree with me, you're wrong.